Welcome to Time Travelling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every episode of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Paddy. Today we'll be discussing the first adventure of new companion Dodo, the Ark. We will be talking about the Doctor, the companions and the villains, and then we will give our thoughts on the story as a whole.
The day this episode goes out is also a very special day for Doctor Who. November 23rd is Doctor Who's birthday.
That's right. On this day 57 years ago, the world was first introduced to the crazy Doctor and his magical blue box, which is bigger on the inside than it appears on the outside.
Ignore the dark times between 1989 and 2005 when Doctor Who was not being made, with the exception of course of the Paul McGann TV movie. It has been an amazing 57 years of Who.
We would love to hear your thoughts on Who, as well as your thoughts on today's story. So in order to join in the discussion, you can check us out at TimeTeamp, that's TimeTaamp, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. Now though, on to the story recap. Episode 1, The Steel Sky. In a jungle, a cycloptic alien is making his way through the undergrowth when he hears the sound of the TARDIS dematerializing. Dodo rushes outside to take a look at her new surroundings, followed by Stephen, who admonishes her for exiting the TARDIS before seeing if the atmosphere outside was safe or not. Dodo responds by saying that she hasn't fallen for their trick and that she knows that they are actually in Whipsnade Zoo outside London. She points out various animals that are native to Earth, and the Doctor says that it could very well be on Earth as the TARDIS sensors are giving off strange readings. Elsewhere on the planet, a group of the aliens and humans are overseeing a court hearing of a human male. He is being charged with negligence in his maintenance duties that could have severely affected the lives of the humans and the aliens, who are called the Monoids. It appears that life on the planet is in a fragile state, and any action that could prove deadly is heavily punished. The man is sentenced to miniaturization for stasis, where he will remain for 700 years. The daughter of the judge begged for leniency, but the defendant accepts the sentence and is shrunken down and placed into stasis. Back in the jungle, the travellers are continuing in their exploration, coming across more and more species native to the planet of Earth. The Doctor then points out that the jungle appears to be in some sort of gigantic room, and that the ground is slightly trembling as well. Dodo begins to show signs of a cold, and the Doctor says that they must get back to the TARDIS so that she can take something for it. He then notices that she has changed her clothes to something for the medieval period, and tells her not to go rooting through the ship's wardrobe without permission. She wonders if the Doctor will send her home, and he chuckles, saying he couldn't if he wanted to. As they go back to the ship, they are followed by a Monoid. Back in the settlement, the court prosecutor, whose name is Zentos and is the second in command of the settlement, is informed of the traveller's presence in the jungle, and he informs the judge, who is the overall commander. The commander's daughter expresses skepticism that there could be anyone in the jungle, but the surveillance feed shows it to be true, and also shows them the TARDIS. The commander then sends Zentos to retrieve them, but tells him to make it an invite rather than an order. In the jungle, Dodo, whose contemporary vernacular is a source of irritation to the Doctor, points out a wall full of pictographs showing mutated versions of Earth animals. Suddenly, an alarm sound, and Stephen goes back to check the source. He sees several Monoids probing around the TARDIS and reports back to the others, describing the unnerving appearance of the aliens only to the Doctor. The trio rush into a nearby cave, and Stephen desperately covers Dodo's mouth in order to prevent her sneezes from giving away their location. They leave the cave when they think the coast is clear and enter a clearing, where they can see the settlement in the distance. The Doctor informs the others that they are actually on a spaceship, but before he can explain any further, they are surrounded by several Monoids wielding clubs. In the settlement, the commander and Zentos are questioning Stephen about how they arrived on the ship, but are skeptical of his claims about the TARDIS. Stephen tells them to talk to the Doctor and he will explain everything to them, but Zentos is reluctant to grant this request until the commander overrules him. Stephen then asks about the nature of the ship and the Monoids, who can only communicate through a form of sign language. The commander explains that they came to Earth seeking refuge from their dying planet. Together, both species are now on their way to Refusus 2, as the Earth 2 is dying due to increasingly violent solar flare activity. Zentos voices his mistrust of the travellers, saying that they could be dissident Refusians looking to impede the ship's progress. The Doctor arrives and denies this claim, saying that they are as human as the others, and uses Dodo's cold as evidence of their time-travelling nature, as the virus was wiped out millennia ago. As he recounts their previous adventures, Zentos dispatches a Monoid to garner more information about the TARDIS, and he explains to the commander's daughter that he wants to be certain of their story. The commander informs the travellers that they are currently in the 57th segment of Galactic Standard Time, which the Doctor explains is 10 million years from when he picked up Dodo. The commander says that they are still 700 years away from their destination, and it will be the future generations that will inhabit Refusus 2. The commander explains that they have taken the entire population of Earth, plus the breeding pair of each animal, which causes Dodo to dub the ship the Ark in honour of the story of Noah. When asked about the location of the rest of the population, the commander informs the group that aside from the necessary ship's crew, the rest of the population have been miniaturized and placed in stasis in a specialized cargo hold. The commander then tells his daughter, who he introduces as Melium, to take Stephen and Dodo to a commemorative statue that is being built whilst he introduces the Doctor to the ship's chief engineer, Maniac, so they can discuss the ship's technical specs. At the statue, Melium explains that it is a monument made of a nearly indestructible form of rock, and it is to be of the Homo sapiens species. Once it is complete, it will be in the shape of a gigantic human. Suddenly, an alarm sounds throughout the ship, and they rush back to the control room to see a monoid being carried in on a gurney. It is complaining of a strange fever, which also starts to affect the commander. Dodo comments that he is most likely caught her cold, and this alarms the Doctor, who takes Stephen to one side. He informs Stephen that the people at this time have no resistance to the common cold, and its effects could prove fatal, potentially putting their own lives at risk if they are deemed to be responsible. This statement comes true when Zentos, who was listening into their conversation, relays what he has just heard to the assembled humans and Monoids. Maniac then announces that the affected Monoid has died, and Zentos orders them to be taken into custody for their crimes. He tells the distressed Melium that they are all at risk, and it seems that their journey for Earth was all for nothing. Episode 2. The Plague. In their prison cell, Dodo is upset at all the trouble she has caused, and the Doctor tries to reassure her that it wasn't her fault. Stephen wonders if they have unknowingly done this to other planets and time periods that they have visited. The Doctor says it is possible, but they have been usually in good health during their travels. Stephen comments about how fast the virus seems to be spreading, which further upsets Dodo. The Doctor is at a loss for how to comfort her, and tells her that she needs to rest, while he voices his annoyance that their imprisonment is stopping them from helping find a cure. In the control room, Zentos monitors surveillance footage of Monoids succumbing to the effects of the virus. It seems to be affecting them worse than the humans. In his chamber, the commander is slipping in and out of a fever state, and the medical officer says his prognosis is not good, due to the records on combating the cold being lost. During a lucid moment, the commander begs Melium to ensure that the journey continues and make sure the ship refuses to. Outside their cell, the travellers witness a Monoid funeral procession go past as it makes its way towards the control room. All deceased bodies are being ejected into space to prevent further contamination. Zentos uses this opportunity to call for a trial to punish the Doctor and his companions, but he's surprised when Maniac and Melium take the position of the defence counsel. They inform the travellers that one of them must present evidence in their case, and Stephen offers to go, as this will allow the Doctor time to think about how to help the ship. In the trial, Stephen and the others are accused of being Refugian spies, and their story being time travellers is a lie. Stephen denies these claims and questions the scientific advancements of Earth if its people can fall prey to a common cold. He also states that because of Zentos' suspicious nature, mankind has not evolved as much as the Zentos thinks it has. Maniac cuts through the argument by suggesting that if released, the Doctor could help create a cure, but Zentos whips the crowd up into a frenzy to support his views. Throughout the trial, Stephen has been showing steadily increasing signs that he also has the virus, a fact that does not go unnoticed by the Doctor and Dodo, who are observing the trial from their cell. Maniac calls for quiet as he puts forward his defence, stating that if they were spies, why would the travellers put themselves in harm's way by catching the virus? He also asks what is the logic of expelling them from the ship if they can help create a cure. Suddenly, the prosecutor receives word that the first human patient has died, which sways the court's vote to guilty. As the Monoid guards go to take Stephen from his cell, he collapses, confirming that he has the virus. Upon Stephen being returned to their cell, the Doctor again implores Zentos to see reason and that he potentially risks the safety of the ship by sentencing them to death, but it is to no avail. However, the commander intercedes and orders Zentos to release the prisoners and allow the Doctor to attempt to create a cure under the proviso that Stephen be the first test subject. Zentos reluctantly agrees, and the Doctor begins his work. He dispatches Dodo to retrieve supplies from the TARDIS, orders Melium to ensure that all those affected be kept warm, and tasks Maniac with gathering membrane samples from several animals. The Doctor administers the vaccine to Stephen, but rather than wait to see if it works, he goes to the other afflicted to administer them as well, rather than risk further loss of life. The cure is a success, and the Doctor begins an immunisation process for the rest of the ship. The travellers are given a friendly send-off, and Zentos apologising for his earlier behaviour. The TARDIS dematerialises, but rematerialises in the exact same spot, a fact which seems to confuse the Doctor. The travellers make their way through the ship to reunite with their friends, but find it strangely empty. Dodo calls the others' attention to the fact that the commemorative statue has been completed, but instead of resembling a human, it looks like a monoid. Episode 3. The Return. The Doctor says that they have arrived 700 years into the future, as the Ark is about to complete its journey. The hallways in the ship are in a poor state, with plants overgrowing and leaves littering the floor. They enter the control room and see it is completely empty, and as they investigate, the Doctor draws their attention to the main console, which seems to have been upgraded with a more advanced autopilot feature. They take a look at the security cameras to see if they can find any signs of life outside of the stasis pods, and they see several signs that the dynamic of the ship has changed, with humans now acting as servants for the Monoids. A group of Monoids and humans arrive, and one of the Monoids, who now have the ability to speak through a voice box, demands to know who the travellers are. The Doctor tells him of their previous experience on the ship, and the Monoid says that in the interim, his people rose up against the humans, and that they are now leaders of the Ark. He then says that he will take them to their leader. They are brought to the leader's chamber, where he is reviewing old security footage of the traveller's time on the ship. The leader, who is signified by the number 1 etched onto his communication collar, asks to know why they have returned to the Ark. He reveals that the cure not only stopped the immediate impact of the virus, but it later mutated and affected the humans on the ship. He tells them that the new virus strain, plus weapons that the humans had unwittingly helped develop, allowed the Monoids to overcome the humans, killing many of them and making the rest their prisoners. He then orders his number 2 to take them to the slave kitchen for confinement. Word starts to spread about the rumoured return of the travellers, but is met with scepticism until they are brought to the slave kitchen. After they are left with the other prisoners, Stephen says that they need to find a way out, and Dodo suggests that they could try and overpower the Monoids, but one of the humans, Dasuk, says that the Monoids' weapons give them the advantage. A council of Monoids observe the final stages of the Ark's journey to Refuses 2, saying that they will turn it into their new homeworld. Number 1 orders an advanced scouting party to go to the planet and ascertain the Refusans' defensive capability. He then instructs that the Doctor and Dodo be brought to him. When the Monoids enter the kitchen, Stephen and Dasuk try to disarm number 2, but their attempt fails when more Monoids enter and kill one of the humans. The Doctor and Dodo are taken away, and Stephen is told that they will be killed if he tries to cause any more trouble. The landing party arrives on Refuses 2, but there are no signs of any locals. The scouting party begins to look around, and after they have gone, an invisible figure goes and investigates their landing craft. As there is no sign of any local life, the Doctor suggests radioing the Ark to begin landing crew and taking humans out of stasis. Number 2 makes a comment about it being a short process, and Dodo accuses the Monoids of being up to something. Before the discussion goes any further, much to the relief of number 2, the Doctor returns from his explorations to say that he has found signs of life. He then shows them a large palace-like building in the distance, and suggests that they go and see why no one came to greet them at the landing site. They enter the building, but again there is no sign of the Refusians. Number 2 begins to trash the entrance hall in an effort to draw the Refusians out, and ignores the Doctor's demands that he stop. They then hear a voice ordering number 2 to stop destroying the property, and when he does not comply, he is forced to drop whatever he is holding. Back on the ship, number 1 reveals his plans to number 3, that he plans to destroy the ship with a fission bomb once the Monoids have landed on the planet. He reveals that the bomb is actually encased in the giant commemorative statue. Unbeknownst to them, number 1's personal servant, Maharis, has been listening in on the conversation. He goes to the slave kitchens and reveals what he has heard to the others, who are skeptical of his claims due to his voluntary service as a servant. Stephen seems to believe him, and so he and Dasuk and the others attempt to locate the bomb. The Doctor and the voice begin to converse about the Ark's approach and why the Refusians are allowing them to colonize it. The Refusians themselves have been rendered invisible due to a solar catastrophe that has severely limited their species' ability to interact with each other. Therefore, it was decreed that humanity could inherit the planet. Meanwhile, number 2 and his own manservant are making their way back to the landing craft, but the manservant tries to stop him, having realised that the Monoids don't plan to bring the humans to the planet at all. Number 2 kills him when he attempts to disarm him, and then he returns to the landing craft and signals the Ark. As he is making his report, the ship is blown up, thereby stranding Dodo and the Doctor until the next landing party arrives, even if one is sent. Episode 4. The Bomb. On the Ark, number 1 and the other Monoids are discussing what to do based on the information number 2 gave before the signal was lost. Number 1 decides to proceed with the colonization and orders all Monoids in stasis to be prepared for transport. However, number 4 is starting to show signs of dissent towards number 1's leadership, but he is not concerned as he is aware of this and has planned accordingly. On the planet's surface, the Refusian expresses his concern to the Doctor about the Ark and the new intentions of the Monoids. He is reluctant to let them land as they will bring an end to the peace and serenity on the planet, but Dodo begs them to give the humans a chance to rebel and overthrow the Monoids. The Refusian agrees and says that the humans will have one day to take back control before his people consider a defensive solution. In the slave kitchen, Stephen is observing the landing preparations of the Monoids and plots with Dasuk to trick the Maharis into allowing them to escape. When he returns to the kitchen to drop off number 1's lunch, Maharis tells the others that the Monoids are preparing to leave and that he is convinced that they will take him with him due to his loyalty. As he is talking, Dasuk sneaks out and the others pretend that he is asleep in his bed, which is actually stuffed with pillows. After he leaves, Dasuk returns and lets the others out and they begin to search for the bomb. As this is going on, number 4 and his colleagues decide that if Refuses 2 is too dangerous to stay on, then they will oust number 1 from leadership and return to the Ark before it explodes. The landing crafts make their way down to the surface, leaving Stephen and all the humans, including Maharis, on board to their fate. The landing is a success, and once they disembark, number 1 and number 3 locate the remains of the first landing craft. Number 1 orders search parties to seek out and destroy whoever killed number 2. Number 4 then uses this to convince the others to back his play against number 1 so they can return to the safety of the Ark and disarm the bomb. Unbeknownst to them all, this is observed by the Doctor and Dodo, who sneak into one of the landing craft and send a message to the Ark. The Doctor says that he will attempt to find the bomb's location and that he will send back some of their landing craft to the ship. He enlists the Refugians to pilot them back, as their invisible form will confuse the Monoids and potentially make them easier to negotiate with. Outside, they are apprehended by Monoid guards who take them back to number 1. Before they leave though, they see the landing crafts take off and the Doctor denies any knowledge of who is flying them. They are questioned by number 1 at the city, but again they deny having seen any of the Refugians, and number 4 then announces that he and many others will go back to the Ark. Number 1 tells them that they are free to do as they wish and reveals that the bomb is hidden in the statue, which is too big to remove and too tough to destroy. Number 4 and his followers leave, and number 1 orders them to be tracked and then killed on the open plains. Back on the Ark, the search is not going well, and Stephen berates Maharis for his woe is me attitude, which is stopping him from helping in the search. Suddenly, a landing craft returns, and the Refugian informs Stephen and the others what is going on. Stephen suggests sending some people down to help the Doctor, whilst the rest will try and locate the bomb. Maharis voices his objection to this, and stating that the dream of humanity is over, and why should they be beholden to it. Dasuk's companion Venusa says that he no longer belongs to humanity, and would be best going down to the planet. She offers to stay on board and help Stevens with the search. Out on the plains, the two Monoid forces encounter each other and start fighting. The landing craft returns, and despite Dasuk's warning to wait, Maharis goes outside to reunite with his master, only to be killed by him. Dasuk waits until there is a lull in the fighting, and then he and the rest of the crew disembark and make their way to the city. They locate the Doctor and Dodo and tell the guards that they are needed by number 1. After they leave, the Doctor reveals the bomb's location, and together they all make their way back to the landing craft. They return to find number 4 as the last Monoid standing, and he lets them go, casting down his weapon in disgust at the waste of Monoid life. On the Ark, Stephen and Venusa try to figure out how to move the statue, and the Refugian offers his assistance. The statue levitates with ease, and it is placed into the launching bay, where it is jettisoned into space, exploding shortly afterwards. Later, the Doctor and the others are saying goodbye to Dasuk and the others, and echoes the Refugians' mandate that they are only welcome to the planet if they make peace with the Monoids. The Doctor says that their ancestors took advantage of the Monoids and effectively made them slaves, so it's only expected that they would rise up in rebellion. He echoes a previous statement he made to Zentos about travelling in tolerance, and then he and the others depart. Venusa wonders that if the travellers ever return again in the future, will they once again be thought of as legends, but Dasuk promises that it won't be so. As the TARDIS lands at its next destination, the Doctor fades away from sight, and Dodo wonders if it might be something to do with the Refugians, but the Doctor tells them that they are under attack. End of the story. Now that that's the story out of the way, we're going to go to the next stage of the podcast, and we're going to go over to the trivia section with Tricia. What do you got for us today?
Cool, thank you, Paddington. So, for trivia today, the air date for the Ark was the 2nd of... No, it wasn't, it was the 5th. That's a 5, not a 2. The air date for the Ark was the 5th of March 1966 to the 26th of March 1966. Writers credited for the story are Paul Erickson and Leslie Scott. This is the only Doctor Who writing credit for Paul. He also wrote the novelisation for the story, which I always like when the writer does both. Paul's non-Who work includes writing for Interpol Calling, The Saint, Out of the Unknown, The Rivals of Sherlock Holmes, and Freewheelers. Paul passed away back in 1991. Now, Leslie Scott is an interesting credit for this. So, she's the first woman credited for writing Doctor Who, which is great. Though, this is her only credit for Doctor Who. In fact, it's her only credit for anything.
Oh.
At the time, she was Paul Erickson's wife and was credited as co-writer, though she did no work on the scripts whatsoever. Erickson later said that it was a personal arrangement he had with her, which was his own personal business at the time.
So she's the first credited female writer, but she's not the actual first female writer.
Correct. And it appears this is some thing that this man did for his wife for reasons that no one knows.
If I do this, will you touch it? Will you touch it now?
I don't get why you would randomly include your wife in the writing credits of a show that you're in, and I don't know why the BBC would agree to it either. But it's fucking strange. Maybe I have in my head like that maybe like they'd just gotten married and they were meant to be on their honeymoon, but he cancelled because he had to do the show, and like I don't know, it's fucking bizarre. Anyway, The director for this story is Michael Imison. Now, this is Michael's only Doctor Who directing credit, which doesn't happen that often. Usually we get people cycling through a bit.
Mm-hmm.
He was heavily responsible for the visual style of the Monoids. And in fact, it was his idea to give them that name. They were originally called the Reptiles in the script. The Bomb was the last episode of television that he ever directed. Ever. He was a BBC director, same as everyone else, and they didn't renew his contract at the end of that story. That's not to say his career ended, though. He did go on to be a script editor with the BBC for a while, and then he went on to be an agent, both an acting agent and a literary agent. So it's an interesting sort of career path that this man has had. The final episode, The Bomb, was recorded out of sequence, which is the first time really in Doctor Who that's ever been done, with the exception of location shooting. This is the first sort of set episode that was recorded out of sequence, because they needed the sets for different things. The Monoids were played by actors, and I thought this was the case when I watched it. They were played by actors, obviously. Duh. But I thought this was the case when I was watching it. And I was right. So they were played by actors, yes Trish, each holding a ping pong ball in their mouth to represent the alien's eye, and then just moving it to make the eye move. It looks so weird.
I wondered how they did that effect, because like, was it just like that they were holding it in their hand and they were like, because the way the Monoids look, right, is that they're very kind of slenderly built. They all have Beatles mop top haircuts.
Yep.
They have that one eye in the center of their face, like not in the top of the head, like, but just there in the center. They have reptilian like hands. I think they got webbed feet, but like the way that they walk is like they're wearing like a really tight skirt, and it's just like shuffle, 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 shuffle.
Yeah, so can you imagine like having to walk around all day with a ping pong ball in your mouth? That's so weird. Peter Purvis didn't like the Monoids very much. He thought they looked ridiculous and he couldn't take them seriously. I can understand that. I don't think they're the most ridiculous looking we've had, but
no, I think they're grand. Like,
yeah, they're okay.
They're not the Thals.
That's because they number which one of them is which.
Yes, exactly.
This is the only Doctor Who story produced by John Wilds for which all episodes exist. It's also his last story as producer. Thank Heavenly Christ.
Yes, because I have, honestly, the John Wilds era, not a great era.
No.
Which is a shame, like, because we've seen some interesting concepts, we've seen some interesting characters, but just like it just felt strange. The whole thing, the whole execution just felt strange.
Yeah, and looking at our sort of average scores, they're our lowest ranked so far, with a running average of 3.19 for you and 2.94 for me. So on to our cast.
Mm-hmm.
So we've a couple of people to get through today, so let's jump on in. So the commander of the Ark on the first visit. So all of these characters at the moment are the first visit to the Ark. So the commander was played by Eric Elliott. This is his only Doctor Who acting credit. His other credits include The Small House at Allington, Gilbert and Sullivan, The Immortal Jesters, The Avengers, Ding, and Z-Cars. Double Ding. Eric passed away back in 1981. Zentos is played by Inigo Jackson. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Inigo?
I think it maybe might depend on where you're from, but I think it might be Inigo. So Inigo,
like Indigo without the D?
Or more like, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya, as you killed my father, prepare to die.
Okay.
My name is Inigo Jackson.
Again, this is his only Doctor Who acting credit. His other credits have included Ivanhoe, The Way We Live Now, Z-Cars, Ding.
Double Ding.
And Diamond Crack Diamond. Indigo passed away in 2001. Side note, Z-Cars got a double ding because it was the second in the list.
Gotcha.
So it's his first,
cool.
So it's a single ding.
Aye.
Maniac, who spoke in defence of the TARDIS team at the trial, is played by Roy Spencer. This is the first of 2 Doctor Who acting credits for Roy, and we'll see him again in Fury from the Deep. Outside of Who, his acting credits include EastEnders, County Hall, The Legend of Robin Hood, The Paradise Makers, and Z-Cars. Ding again. He also worked in special effects and is known for his work on Superman, 1978, Krull, and Batman in 1989.
I love Krull. Krull is amazing. Actually, that's one thing that kind of kept coming into my head was that in Krull, there's a Cyclops character, very reminiscent of the Monoids.
Oh. I wonder if he brought over some of his experience from...
Possibly. That's kind of cool.
Mellium, who is the daughter of the commander, is played by Kate Newman. Again, this is her only Doctor Who acting credit. And her only other acting credit was in a 1966 episode of Armchair Theatre.
At which point she decided...
Armchair Theatre.
At which point she decided the armchair was quite comfy and decided to stay there.
On to our second visit to the Ark. So we have Maharis, is played by Terence Woodfield. Terence also appeared in the Daleks' Master Plan as the Master of Salation. He was the guy with rocks stuck to him, or what looked like rocks stuck to him.
Oh, right. I thought he was a lizard-looking guy. It's hard to tell. No existing footage and what.
His other acting credits include The Tomorrow People, Z-Cars, Ding, Emergency Ward 10, and The Avengers.
Double ding.
Dasuk is played by Brian Wright. This is his only Doctor Who acting credit. And in fact, Brian is better known as a writer than he is as an actor. He's written for Crown Court, The Canal Children, and Spy Force. Venusa, who I keep saying Vanessa, but it's not her name, it's Venusa with a U, is played by Eileen Helsby. Again, only Doctor Who credit for Eileen. Her other acting credits include The Bill, Survivors, and Looking for Clancy. On to the voice of the Refusian. This is Richard Beale. This is the first of 4 Doctor Who acting credits for Richard. We'll see him again. Well, we'll see him, because we didn't see him this time, in The Gunfighters, The Makra Terror, and The Green Death. His non-Who acting credits include A Night to Remember, The Man in the Iron Mask, Where Eagles Dare, Treasure Island, Blake 7, Bergerac, John Silver's Return to Treasure Island, and A Handful of Dust.
I need to find out who he plays in Where Eagles Dare, because...
I knew you would. The minute I looked it up, I was like, Paddy's going to be looking this up later on. Richard passed away back in 2017. Lastly, we have our companion. So, as Dodo, we have Jackie Lane. Now, an interesting thing about Jackie, particularly when you bear in mind that last week I said I was slightly concerned about the doctor saying that Dodo looks like Susan. Jackie was actually up for the role of Susan.
Really?
Yeah. She auditioned and everything, but she withdrew herself from consideration because she didn't want to sign on for a year-long contract at that time. So it wasn't that she didn't get the role, it's that she decided not to go for it anymore.
Oh.
You may notice that sometimes in the story she lapses into her Cockney accent, and the doctor actually makes a point of we need to correct the accent. There's a reason for that. The production team were instructed by their superiors at the BBC that it was unacceptable for a character in Doctor Who to speak anything other than BBC English. Now, anyone who knows like old BBC programming, and particularly like BBC radio and stuff like that, there's a very specific way that people spoke on the BBC. You know, it wasn't quite the Queen's English, it was a slight variation on that.
Yeah.
But the idea of Dodo having a Cockney accent, they were like, nope.
It wasn't like Cilla Black. What's your name, Chuck? That was a terrible Scouse accent. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, never do that again.
I can do better. I just choose not to.
Interesting, Jackie didn't do any acting after Doctor Who. And she's the last surviving companion of the classic series not to have done any work with Big Finish. Though Dodo does appear as a character, Jackie's never come back to do the voice. She did go on to become a theatrical agent, was what she did after. And funnily enough, she represented Tom Baker, who we'll see as the 4th Doctor, and Janet Fielding, who would go on to play a companion later in the show.
Interesting. Very interesting. And for anyone that might potentially be concerned, I looked up who Richard Beale played in Where Eagles Dare. He is not one of the main characters, so therefore he's a background extra.
But he was still in the film, and
He
that's
was.
the important part.
Exactly. We will try it. That'll now become another potential bingo card thing, is that what other connection we can get to Where Eagles Dare. And there's like 2 or 3 more coming up, I think.
Or just, movies that Paddy really enjoys.
Yeah. How bad? So another very interesting round of trivia. We've had lots of dings and double dings on the scorecard, plus my own For Eagles Dare scorecard. Yeah, so yay. We're now going to go on to the main part of the podcast, which is the discussion of the Doctor, the characters, the companions, and the villains. So as ever, we're going to start off with the Doctor. And Trish, over to you. What are your thoughts on the Doctor in this story?
I liked him. I had a few moments where I didn't, and I'll explain those in a second. We're seeing the Doctor as a scientist, which I love. It very much reminds me of the Sensorites, where Ian was ill in that case, and the Doctor was trying to figure out what happened and what's wrong with the water and find a cure. So I love seeing the Doctor sciencing his way out of things. I think it's really cool. I love his interactions with the Refusions, or the Refusion, I suppose singular. We only meet one of them. The fact that he's just completely at ease and just like, yeah, cool. You're invisible. And the thing that I have sort of mixed feelings about, though, is his treatment of Dodo.
Okay.
So he very much treats Dodo like a child. I think even more so than we saw with Vicky or with Susan, to be honest. Like, why is he so angry at her about her clothes? Now, I think those may have been Vicky's clothes that may have been part of it. But, like, why is he so angry that she went and explored the wardrobe? Why does she need permission for everything? Like, that's a little bit over the top and, like, babying her way more than he has anybody else. And I don't really understand why. What I liked, though, and this is going to seem weird as a thing to like, is how he's at a total loss as to how to comfort her. She's understandably very upset because she thinks that she's poisoned all of these people. And he has no idea how to comfort her when he keeps saying, like, stop crying. She's like, I'm not crying, just my eyes are running or my nose is sniffly. And she's like, I'm actually crying. And he's like, and he doesn't know how to comfort her. And that's very true to his character. We've never seen him being... he's had some lovely moments with people, but when it comes to, like, comforting someone who's actively upset at the time, he's not the best at it.
But as well, like, is that this is his first time, like, with Dodo, like, trying to comfort her, so it's like, shite, how did I used to do this for the other, like, for Susan or for Vicky?
Yeah. And actually, jumping the timeline massively, if we talk about the way 13 interacts with Graham, and a particular scene with Graham that people are sort of torn about, where Graham voices a particular concern and fear that he has. I'm not going to spoil it too much, but he voices a particular concern and fear that he has. And the 13th Doctor is just like, I'm incredibly socially awkward and I don't know what to say. So I'm gonna do this. Later on, I'll think of something and I'll come back and say it then. Yeah.
Like, I think there's only really 2 Doctors that kind of spring to mind. Maybe 3 Doctors that kind of spring to mind when it turns out kind of comes to the kind of comforting aspect of stuff. I think it's Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, and Peter Davison to an extent. But the thing about the wardrobe is that, okay, see, we've no idea what happened inside the ship.
No.
So, like, did she just wander into the TARDIS and come out wearing clothes and then dash out into the thing? And for she's wearing like a kind of a court page's outfit from, like, I'd say, like, maybe 10th century Europe. It was just very kind of strange, and it was like, is that something that you would do if you were in someone else's home? Where you just, like, dash in, raid their wardrobe and run out wearing what you thought was the nicest thing? It just felt so strange.
I didn't pick it up that that's what she did. I imagined they were like, okay, have a look around, we're going to fly somewhere, and she decided that she found this entire big wardrobe with all these different clothes, and she just played dress up. Do you know what I mean? It's like, my issue with it is that I don't think he'd ever give out to anyone else the same way.
Yeah, that's actually, that's something now that it might reflect on the two people, or both Stephen and Dodo. But this is the first, I put it down like this is a new era for the first Doctor, right? In that they're, at this point in time, they're just companions.
Yeah.
And maybe he's trying to gain back this lost sense of family, like that, he had, when he's monologuing, like last week's episode, The Massacre, that he misses people. Like he misses them, and, not just the fact that, I miss having company. It's like, he grew to love them in various different ways. And maybe he's trying to get that back, because, we saw that, he commented about how Dodo looks like Susan, and maybe he's subtly, or not subtly, what's the thing in the back of your head? Subconsciously. Thank you. Trying to maybe turn Stephen into Ian, or at least kind of get him to learn what, like, the stuff that Ian learned. So at this, because of that relationship, I'm just getting this vibe of they're just companions at the moment. That sense of family is not there as it once was. And so it'll be interesting seeing how it's going to develop, because, like, he's not cold towards Dodo. Like, he has that annoyance at the wardrobe thing. And again, it's still just kind of like, I can kind of see where you're coming from. But his thing about trying to reassure her, and then they just kind of go, I don't know what. It's like a granddad looking after her, like a not very affectionate granddad being told to babysit their granddaughter,
Yeah, I think as well, with the Doctor in this story, he's very much himself, with the exception of that bit, which I thought was a little bit weird. He's very much true to form, the Doctor we've known up until now.
No, there's something that I might have read too much into this, because, like, again, we're not watching them weeks apart. We're watching them I'm watching them, like, I was watching an episode a day. Okay, so we're entering into the last third of William Hartnell's run.
Yeah,
and we know that in real life, William Hartnell was steadily getting sicker as time was going on. And I'm just wondering, like, did you pick it up that maybe this performance by him was a small bit phoned in?
I wouldn't say it was phoned in. I wouldn't go that far. I think there was less for him to play with. Yeah,
maybe that might have been, like, the reading I got in it, because, like, when there are times, like, when I feel like his performance is a bit, it's not as kind of, like, exuberant as it usually is. I'm just wondering, is it the fact that it's just the material that's there, or is he sick at this point in time and is trying to act through the sickness?
I think this story has less emotional impact.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
And we've had a lot of emotional impact the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that could be it. Because, like, we had the Mythmakers, which ended emotionally. We had the Daleks' Master Plan, which is, that's an emotional roller coaster. We've had the Massacre, which, granted, the Doctor wasn't in it a huge amount of time, but William Hartnell was in it, and again, that ended emotionally. So maybe that might have been what I was picking up. I think
this is just a bit of a lighter story that he doesn't have as much to play with.
Possibly, yeah. That's probably it. But that was my last comment on the Doctor.
Cool. So if we move on to our companions, cool. Do you want to go with our returning companion or our new companion?
How about we do the story-based companion? Like, because what we've got this time is, we decided that because there's various villainous and heroic qualities to both the humans and the Monoids, we're going to discuss them in their two separate time periods. So how about we do the Refusian, Stephen, and then Dodo?
Okay. Cool.
So, Refusian ex machina. Like, I'm genuinely interested to know just what the fuck they are. Are they giants? Are they Jedi? Are they shapeshifters? Like, what are they? Because you're never given the impression that they're gigantic.
No, he clearly has a human-sized butt because he sits down.
Yes, exactly.
And they fit in the pod.
Yeah. Fit in the pod. their voices of a normal timber, other than the fact that it's like hello. It's like just
Bit
speaking
Brian
to
Blessedy.
yeah, exactly, like, you know, but a bit more sane. So yeah, and it's like, but they're managed, like, they can telekinetically move this huge statue. Presumably it's telekinesis, because otherwise they're picking it fucking up, or like they're super strong. I want to know more. Also, did he say that they can't see each other?
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? So I couldn't remember when you were doing the recap. I couldn't remember. I was waiting for you to mention it. You didn't. Yeah, I think he says. So he says that, like, obviously he can't be seen. He can see the world, but they can't see each other, which makes sense because I've always found in science fiction the idea that invisible people can see each other is weird, unless you explain that they're in a different phase and people in a different phase can see other people in that phase. But that's not what this is. And yeah, so this society it's so hard, like, it's so devastating when you think about it. They can't interact with each other.
Like, the only time we've come across, like, another invisible entity was I can't even remember their name now, but the invisible monsters from the second half of Dalek's Master Plan.
Yeah.
Now, they seem to be working in concert, like, as in, like, they seem to be attacking in packs. So, like, I would like to know how that was explained.
I think the difference with the Refusions is that the Refusions weren't born this way.
Yeah. No. This is a question, right? If they wore clothes, would the clothes be visible, or are they wearing clothes and the clothes are... Because, like, I just had this image of, like, you know, I'm walking around now and no one knows. Yeah, but everyone else could be walking around naked and no one knows.
Okay. You're taking this to, like, crazy levels. Personal read of it is they don't wear clothes anymore.
Yes.
Because there is no fucking need.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever clothes they were wearing when the incident happened probably got irradiated the same way they did.
Cool. All right.
So yes. Assuming they needed clothes to begin with, because maybe they're like Wookiees, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
Assuming they needed clothes to begin with, I do not think they're wearing any now.
Okay. That just was funny. But I did like that they kind of reminded me of the Rills a small bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always nice when, like, the Doctor has this sort of meeting of the minds with an alien race that isn't out to, like, you know, fuck him or the universe or anyone else over. Yeah,
the thing that I like about the Refusions is that they are very similar to the Rills, actually. They're almost the same character when you think about it. The one Refusian that we meet, because we only meet one of them.
Yeah.
Seems like a really nice guy. The fact that they created a world for the travelers from the Ark to live in, because they can't live in it themselves, is such a benevolent thing to do. And it kind of reminds me of a less fucked up version of Encounter at Farpoint, the pilot of Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah.
Where you had the weird alien jellyfish.
Yeah.
That was trapped and was creating whatever the humans wanted.
Like the apples and the different colour fabric and...
the entire... outpost or whatever. So it kind of reminded me a little bit of that, but in a less slave way, obviously.
Yeah.
Because this is the Refusians' choice. The one thing about them, though, is that the travelers from the Ark can have this world if they are peaceful.
Yes.
And clearly the Refusians have no qualms about using violence when they deem it necessary.
Yeah. Again, kind of like the Rills.
Yeah. Similar to you, though, I want to know more about them. I would love if the Doctor encountered them before they were made invisible. That would be cool.
I just, you were saying about, like, they make this wonderful world. Like, you had you reminded of Encounter at Farpoint. On a more sinister side, I'm reminded of an episode of The Twilight Zone called To Serve Man, where, like, humans are brought to this planet, and it just turns out, like, it's a very famous kind of trope. It's like, it's a cookbook, where it turns out humans are being removed to the other planet so they can be eaten. It's like, cool.
Yeah, no. It's somewhere in it's a bit further down the scale than either of those.
No, they're benevolent. They defend themselves when they need to, but they are benevolent, and I do want to see more. I would like to see the catastrophe, and I would like to see something like the massacre or the fires of Pompeii, where they go back in time to see the event or to know it, and the Doctor can't interfere because he knows what's going to come next. He knows that the humanity will be saved because the Refusians go invisible.
Yeah, I think that'd be really, really interesting. I like when we have these sort of one-off characters that we want to see more of. Also, like, you could just have, like, the Doctor turns up at, like, some sort of intergalactic summit.
Yeah.
And you have the Rills and the Refusians just both there. You're like, hello.
We're very sorry about our order. It's grand. We can't smell anything anymore. So, Stephen. Okay, I'll tell you what, right? I will go first and see if I say some stuff that you are clearly aching to get off your chest.
Okay,
so,
off we go.
First of all, now you know what it feels like to be the pain in the ass that runs out the door. Yeah, fucking, that teach you. I think that he is just as dumb, if not dumber, than he was in the massacre here.
Yeah.
Okay, no, unfortunately I think I missed it on the summary. But Stephen starts to feel poorly while they're in the cell, and he puts it down to cabin fever. He starts sweating and he's whatever. You know that you were in a room with someone that is very, very sick. Why, in the name of fucking God, would you volunteer to testify in front of people that will die if they contract this thing off of you?
Because clearly, Stephen never researched 2020 in his history lessons.
But no, I'm sorry. Right. You're not the most eloquent speaker. You're not the most scientific mind.
No.
You, and as has been proven, the person that is a very eloquent speaker and has a very scientific mind can't seem to comfort your fellow human. Why not let him go speak and you look after Dodo? Dodo is unfortunately very named. You were the fucking Dodo.
I'm going to circle back around to that point.
Okay.
When we get to our overall. Okay, but keep that point in your mind, because I'm going to circle back around to that when we get to our overall. My thing about Stephen, I have said it from the very first. I have tried to like him. I have tried so hard, but Stephen, you're a fucking asshole. Nobody said you could go out. Stephen, she doesn't need your fucking permission. Who put you in charge? Like, you kind of joked it off as like, oh, now he knows what it feels like. No, he's an asshole. And we have talked about it before. Is it that he's overprotective? Is it that he's sexist? What is it? And I'm still hesitant to say that it's sexist, because other than Brett, we've only ever seen him interacting with female co-travelers. So I'm hesitant to mark it down as sexism, because I don't think we have enough evidence to prove that point.
No.
I am just writing it down as he's a fucking asshole. He's not a nice person. He has nice moments. He's very compassionate. We've discussed that before. But like, nobody said you could go out. Who said you could do this? Who said you could do that? Stephen, you don't control this young woman's life. And even if you wanted to say like, oh, you don't know where we are, you don't know whatever, that's not your call. Like, that's not up to you. And also, you did the exact same things, so stop being such a fucking hypocrite. Also, I've spoken before about how the way he speaks can come across as very intimidating. He gets all up in your personal space and he speaks quite loudly. And that continues in this story. And I'm not a fan. At all. The other thing that pisses me off that he said was like, you'll have to watch when she's like looking at the statue as they're building it. He just calls out, you'll have to watch her. She'll have the whole thing down. Stephen, you don't even fucking know her. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? We saw it starting with her and him last episode. When he was like, what do you think you're doing? Like, we could be going anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's quite a strong reaction. And I wanted to wait and see how it continued in this episode. And it does continue. And Stephen, fuck off. Like, seriously. I've had enough of him. I'm ready for him to not be. I would have been perfectly content if he had left last episode and not come back.
He's not in your Christmas card list anyway, I know that much.
No, and I completely agree with you as well. Is like, Stephen is going to be the spokesperson for the group. Well, that's not going to end well, is it? Right? Ignoring the fact that he's ill. He's a very short-tempered, impatient dumbass. He doesn't even understand what's happening. How the fuck can he explain it to somebody else?
Yeah, again, it's the thing of like, okay, you're like, there's no evidence at the moment, right, to show that the Doctor is human. Okay, completely none, absolutely none whatsoever. So there's a fair chance that you can assume that he's not going to be contract the cold. Yeah. However, you know Dodo has contracted the cold, and you know that Dodo is human, just like you. So therefore, you know that you are capable of contracting this fucking thing. Now, the cells aren't exactly tiny by any stretch of the imagination. And it's like, I just know, I just think it's dumb. I honestly think it's just fucking the height of stupidity that he would volunteer to go speak on behalf of the merits of just no, move on, because otherwise we're just going to spend the next 25 minutes giving out about him. So we'll now talk about Dodo.
Yeah. My first thought was, what is she wearing? I'll be honest. It's an interesting choice. Although then again, my favourite companion ever had some interesting costume choices as well. So I'm not really going to complain too much. Dodo very easily accepted the fact that she's been transported in a blue box. Even if she doesn't think they could be anywhere but Earth, because that's still a little bit, one step ahead, which is fine. She clearly has no issue. Like, oh, we've moved. Cool. That's awesome. I do feel bad that everyone's treating her like a child. And she clearly feels so bad about her illness and the fact that she made other people sick. Which, they kind of, they write it in a slightly humorous way of like, I'm not crying, it's just my nose, I'm not crying, I am crying, I'm crying now, yeah, no, I'm sad now. They kind of write it in a bit of a weird way, I'll be honest. But it's nice that she feels compassion.
Well, yeah, you see, this is the thing now, right, is that I don't think that this is the best presentation for Dodo's introduction. Like, I don't, because while it is humorous, she comes across as very kind of soppy and a bit moany. Like, the way we used to give out about Susan with the, I've lost the will to fucking carry on type thing. It's got shades of that. And it's just kind of strange that, like, the last time we had a new female companion, like a longer female companion, we would say, was Vicky. And Vicky was, brash, she was intelligent, she was confident, she was this, that, and the other. Now, Dodo is definitely confident in the sense that she has no fear running out the fucking door and like kind of saying, you're not pulling the wool over my eyes, look, that's a zebra, that's a giraffe, that's a big elephant. But just that's kind of seen kind of completely, it's the polar opposite of what we see at the start. And then I don't think there's a huge presence from her in this story. And I would have liked to have seen a bit more from her, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say her being upset is the complete polar opposite. I think it was written a little bit poorly, but I think it's completely understandable.
Oh no, being upset at the damage you've caused, yeah, no, absolutely. But maybe it's just the humorous nature of the way that it was written. But it comes across as very kind of overboard, like kind of just like that sort of wailingness.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that, but I get how you would have.
Yeah.
The one thing that I will say is, like, she doesn't do a whole lot in this story.
No.
Which, to be honest, most of our companions, like, if you look back at Stephen, if you look back at Vicky, in their first story out the gate, they often don't contribute a hell of a lot because they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I don't hold that against her all that much.
No, I would think that, as I said, with the comparison to Vicky, is just that I suppose it's the presentation of the character throughout, like the small bits of stuff like that. Yeah, she didn't contribute overall, like, to the defeating of Bennett or anything like that. she was just there.
I'm thinking of the Romans for Vicky, but
oh right, gotcha. I suppose that goes back to our talks about the character's best bits and whatever. Is that I had considered the Romans to be in one of her standout moments.
Was it? Yeah, that's
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The thing with Dodo is that I'm quite enjoying her. I'll be honest. Maybe it's because she's not Stephen, but the thing I like is that I think the way they played her being upset, I could have done without sort of, is she sniffling because of her cold or is she crying? I could have done without that and just had her be upset and just leave it at that.
And I think that would have been perfectly fine. I just think that the way that Dodo's being presented to me is, I think it's very kind of over the top and kind of hammish.
Yeah. What I do like about her though is that while she's not quite as vocal in her own defense as we'll see with some future companions, she clearly is just like, oh, for fuck's sake. And she just rolls her eyes at them when they try to belittle her or whatever. She's just like, yeah, whatever. It's like she's not taking it from them lightly. Do you know what I mean? It's not just like, she's not getting downhearted because of the way they treat her. She's just like, oh, fuck it, whatever. And as well, like, she is quite insightful and quite willful. Like, she has no issue standing up to the Monoids of the future.
No.
You know, she's perfectly willing to jump in. There isn't a whole lot for her to do, but she's willing to do whatever she can do. So yeah, I'm interested to see how she develops. I don't think it was the strongest outing for her first story. I don't think it was the weakest either. And, you know, you kind of compared like your Reign of Terror a bit. I've lost the will to live, whatever. I certainly wouldn't rank it anywhere near that in terms of a performance.
No, but in terms of the vibe that I was getting, it was just that sort of a vibe. No, I definitely agree. Like that, there's a lot. See, as a first presentation, it's not the strongest, but there's seeds there that the next story and the story after can potentially develop. Definitely better than Stephen in the story, anyway. I'll tell you that much.
That's not hard.
All right. No, and before we circle back to that, let's move on to the. This is another new one because before we had the concept of historical characters. Now we're coming into morals, ethics. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. So do you want to do the humans first or the Monoids first?
So I have the humans in both sections. So how about we do the humans of 700 years ago? And okay, so we have their. If we want to equate it back to like say the pilgrims of old, they're searching for a new homeland. Now. You have the tropes, and tropes come from stories like these. You have the commander, who is the leader of his people. He has a very King Solomon type thing where it's like, let me hear everything. I'll make the best judgment as I possibly can. And he's instilled in his people a sense of faith and understanding to the extent of the first person he's like. Granted, no, it's not the harshest sentence in the world. He's put into stasis for 700 years. Although, thanks to movies like Demolition Man, the concept of "are you awake during your stasis" just scares the shit out of me. But the guy accepts his fault. Like, he accepts his sentence willingly, and I think you can only get that by having cultivated a system that people understand why they're potentially being punished and they're seeking to rectify it. So I like the commander. I think he exemplifies the best qualities of humanity in that regards. The same way with Melium, because she's his daughter and therefore emulates him. Well, I said therefore, no, that's kind of a bit, fucking not a nice statement. Melium emulates him because she respects him. Maniac, again, doing the decent thing of, like, look, they can't, like, it's innocent until proven guilty. I'll defend them. On the flip side of that, though, you have Xentos, who exemplifies every negative aspect about humanity when it comes to finding new things. They're shifty, we can't trust them. You're whipping the crowd up into a frenzy. Just all that kind of, that negative bullshit that really drives me insane about people. Also, yeah, okay, when it comes to the relationship with the Monoids, yes, you allow them sanctuary. But you've essentially cultivated a fucking free labour workforce.
Yeah, so in terms of the humans of the original visit, the only person I had anything outwardly negative to say about was Xentos, who's just a paranoid dickhead. End up. In fairness, at least at the end he apologised, which is good. He showed a bit of growth there. I find that they fall into like this science fiction trope of what I would term advanced primitives. They've moved so far forward, they've actually moved backwards.
Yeah, every kind of out there concept seems, not quite quaint, but just it's illogical. Like, that can't be a thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
And they're very mistrustful of the unknown. Now, in one respect, and you kind of addressed this when you said about the guy who gets punished at the beginning, from their perspective, they are the last of humanity. If anything happens to this ship, they're gone. So the idea of of people turning up out of fuck off nowhere, first of all, who the fuck are you? Where'd you come from? And the idea of an illness that could spread across not only them, but the monoids as well. I can understand some of that. I think, yes, Zentos does definitely, like, buys into the trope of, like, fear-mongering everyone and blah, 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 blah. But at least it's an understandable paranoia, if that makes sense. Still paranoia, but you can kind of understand why his brain went there. In terms of their relationship with the monoids of the past, I'll be honest, I read that completely wrong when I first watched it.
Okay.
Because I saw it as them deferring to the monoids a lot. A lot of it was, but what about the monoids? This was done to the monoids. The monoids get to choose. Like with that first trial. It was the monoids who got to decide your man's fate because it was one of the monoids that was injured or whatever. And yeah, the monoids drove them around and the monoids did this, that, and the other thing. But I didn't really pick up on it as a slave labour force. And that was probably a miss on my side. Because clearly we find out when we jump to 700 years in the future, that is what it was meant to be. That's what it was meant to be portrayed as. I missed that the first go around. I'll be honest. I think it was just my mind hadn't focused on that. And I think because they were constantly interpreting for the monoids, I thought that they gave them more respect than maybe they had.
No, I like you can kind of see it all right at points where it's like, deferring to the monoids that you are the injured party. How would you like to proceed with this? But then it's kind of clear like that, like, dispatch the monoids to do this, dispatch the monoids to do that. It's like, cool. How about dispatch the team? At which point monoids and I was going to save it to the overall, but I might as well just say now. Do I get serious fucking vibes from watching this?
Oh.
The original Planet of the Apes series.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Yeah. Ape has killed ape. Monoid has killed monoid. I know, like, that is actually there. Like, at the very end, like, it's at the very end.
So do you want to talk about the humans of the future, or do I want to do the monoids of the past and then jump to the future for both of them?
No, I think actually no. We'll carry on with the humanity bashing or lifting up, whatever way I want to put it. We'll carry on with the human side of things. So yeah, like 700 years, and you get like you reap what you sow. But that's essentially what you get here.
Yeah, I had an interesting thing, right? So.
Okay.
The way the monoids explain it is that somehow after the vaccine, the humans became very weak-willed and they needed direction. And so that power imbalance shifted. And the monoids were suddenly the ones guiding the humans, and it sort of evolved to this state. They don't look fucking weak-willed to me.
But see, this is the thing now, right, is that, okay, you find out that the virus mutated. Fair enough. No, did it only mutate against humans? I think that's the implication, that only the humans were affected by the mutated virus.
Although the monoids learned how to speak.
In a negative sense.
In a negative sense, yeah, it only affected them negatively. Yeah.
No, the monoids speak through the use of technology. They don't have. It's not natural.
Oh yeah, speech. They gained a greater understanding of technology over time.
Yeah. No, the way that I can kind of put it is that, like, and they also said, like, the humans helped us develop weapons, like unwittingly developed. So is it a case of, because humans were so affected by it, did they potentially fear like a human like did the ruling council of the ship effectively fear like a human kind of uprising, so they gave the Monoids more power to be able to protect them, and as such handed over the keys to the kingdom. That's how I'm reading into it.
Yeah. Well, that's how I gather as well, that like they weren't sure they'd be able to defend themselves anymore. So they trained or whatever the Monoids to do it with them / for them. And that backfired. The only thing I take issue with, though, and again, this could just be Monoid propaganda, is the idea that at that point in time, so at that 700 mark, the Monoids are still describing them as weak-willed. And that's clearly not the case. The humans are intelligent enough to know that without weapons, they don't stand a chance. But as soon as they have an opportunity, most of them, barring one or two exceptions, go for it.
And like, yeah, I think they're judging it completely off like Maharis, because like Maharis is completely like, like, you know, like, oh, they'll look after me, they'll take care of me, they'll, you know, give me my sweets, and then it was like they'll take me down to the promised land, they'll take me here's whatever. So, and then like obviously, yeah, because look, we don't have the weapons, we don't have the capabilities of fighting back. It's better to survive, you know.
Yeah.
That sort of, so that's where they come in from the weak-willed side of things. But they do have that never say die. I think Venusa more so than Dasuk. I think Venusa definitely comes across as more of the leader for the future waves than Dasuk does.
Yeah, I think Venusa's the brains and Dasuk's the bronze. that in that particular dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, like the humans of the future, like
the future.
The humans of the future.
I don't think they're as interesting as the humans of the future.
Yeah, I don't think the 700-year in the future humans are as interesting as the humans that we met originally.
Yeah.
The humans from the second visit are more, they could have been anyone, anywhere, whereas the humans of the first visit were interesting because they had this advanced primitive thing going. You know, it was very specific to their situation, whereas the humans of 700 years later, this story could happen in the past, it could happen in the future, and those characters would fundamentally be the same. So on to the Monoids, who I think the future Monoids are probably the only people that I would actually class as the villain, like, outright.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were your thoughts on the Monoids of the first visit, though?
So the Monoids of the first visit, I was saying that they introduced, for me, when they're first introduced, it's something that I had never seen in kind of an early sci-fi, which is refugees from another planet come to us, and in order to gain asylum, offer us beneficial technology for purely benevolent reasons. Like I made the thing of like, you know, it's a cookbook with the refugees. No, you get the impression that, look, please let us live here. Here's all our technology. We can live in harmony, all this type of stuff. And then I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a movie, District 9, which it's a South African science fiction movie. It's fantastic. But again, it deals with the thing of aliens looking for refuge. They come to Johannesburg and they settle over it, and they get thrown in, like after a while they get thrown into slums, and they're treated like fourth class citizens essentially. Like, and it's their technology is used by gangs, and they live in like shanty towns, and it's a great movie, and it kind of reminded me a small bit of this. And the Monoids of the past, all they were looking for, I think, was just to survive, and very much in that sense of like, you know, when the Planet of the Apes. No, when Planet of the Apes, the apes they're bullied. They are slaves. Like, you know, they're tortured and whatnot. So I would love to have seen what was the catalyst for the actual Monoid uprising. Yeah. Like what was done that's 700 years into the future, which we'll kind of jump to now. Why are they like this?
Yeah, because like for me, like the Monoids of, that's it, the Monoids of the first age. Let's put it that way, right? Were simple but very intelligent, and the Doctor comments on it. He's like, "You're really intelligent. You might not be able to communicate at the same level, but you're really intelligent." And though they weren't able to speak freely, they were able to communicate, and they were clearly a functioning part of the system on board the ship.
Yeah.
I too would be very interested to know, did their relationship with the humans deteriorate further before it got better? Or is it just as their ability to communicate and as their access to technology advanced, did they just not like the status quo? I'm curious to know if it got better before, for them, if it got better before, if it got worse before it got better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Because at the time when you're watching the first age, none of the monoids appear unhappy in their situation.
Yeah, they don't. Again, like when all the when their facial features are so non-descriptive, like they're just so like descriptive, I suppose, that, and all the communicators through sign language. No, and like there's no real sort of like huffing and puffing when they do the sign language, so it's very like I want to know how they got to number one.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. And I suppose speaking of number one is that like he is an example of absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Oh yeah.
To the extent of you're willing to go to a civil war with your own people who are already refugees, mind you. You know, you want to have a civil war just because you hate humans so much. Now, granted, they all kind of hate the human. Number 4, like, he doesn't particularly have any fondness for the humans, but he's not willing to like risk the monoid race.
Yeah, I do find like the dynamic of, we learned to speak and develop weapons, so we took over. We took over as supreme overlords. It's an interesting leap.
Yeah.
I want to know like what were the middle, going from like a Planet of the Apes thing. What were the middle 2 movies in that, or I suppose 3rd and 4th movie?
Yeah, because okay, so you've got like you've got Planet of the Apes and then Beneath, then you have Escape.
Yeah. So I want to know about movies 3 and 4.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I get 2 and 4 confused. Also, to your point about everyone looking the same, at least they wear numbers.
Yeah. No.
Very good.
No,
Clearly,
exactly.
they've been listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we say hello by destroying other people's things. They just ransacked this place. It's like, what the fuck? So the monoids of the future are
dicks.
Thankfully, not all of them. And you do get the sense at the end that the monoids who put down their weapons and who, that they'd be willing to live in peace.
Well, see, this is it now, right? Is that of all the monoids that had weapons, only number 4 survives, and I love that at the end where he just like he lets the Doctor and Dodo go back onto the ship in the sort of like what's the fucking point type of thing. It was great. I loved it.
I do wonder if there's more monoids around though, because it seems like a very reduced number if only 4 survived.
Well, he, as far as I know, he's the only one that survived on the planet. But there's obviously the monoids that are still in stasis.
Yeah.
So I would say that having one of them survive probably stops history from repeating itself.
Yeah.
And getting that small little crying statue of the ape at the end of, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, or in this case, a crying monoid. So again, like I kind of like what Dasuk and Venusa say at the end of the story. I would be very interested to see what happens in another 700 years if the Doctor ever came back.
And so we come to the end where we discuss our overall thoughts on the story. So, Paddy, I will hand over to you. What were your thoughts on the arc?
So, my thoughts on the arc are that in terms of performance from our new arrival and our mainstays, I thought it was a very meh story. I thought it was a very meh story. I didn't think the Doctor was overtly strong in it, or like an overtly strong presence. Now, again, that possibly due down to the fact that we've had such emotional stories the last couple of weeks. But I felt he was very reduced. I'm not going to talk about Stephen, because my thoughts on Stephen are there. And with Dodo, I am curious to see what story number 2 will bring. Not because I was so fascinated with her in story 1, but I want to see if the things that I think are there will actually be expanded upon.
Mm.
The concept of the story, though, is what I think is the strongest thing. And I think the strongest thing about is that you visit a place and then you return to it. Like it's not and not in the way that we're left a couple of stories later on, to what if they went back to the Ark, return to the Ark, episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4, whatever, to do it in the same story. It's quite ingenious. I think it's really, really cool.
Yeah, jumping the storyline a little bit. This isn't Peladon.
No, it's not Peladon, or it's not just like Earth. yeah, exactly. Like, no, that was an amazing concept. Like to show the best and worst of both races, not living in harmony. I'm doing air quotes. Then not living in harmony, and then I suppose effectively being forced to live in harmony. Having the Doctor converse again with a race that shares his morals and ethics. It's kind of cool. It's nice. Overall, I wouldn't go out of my way to watch this story again. I'll put it that way. If it's on, and if I want to watch Doctor Who and it's on, okay, cool, I'll do it. But to pull from the catalogue, I wouldn't be one of my first ones. So I think I would put this at a 2.75.
Okay. For me, I think it's a very well made story. The production value is very high. Yeah. Bearing in mind that we haven't had a chance to actually enjoy production value for any of season 3 up to now. So for that, I think the production value is very, very good. I think it's a very well made story. Again, I love the premise. The idea of the impact the Doctor and his companions have on the places they visit, and seeing that impact the following week. Again, yeah. You watch this every day. I watch it. I tend to watch the whole thing in one sitting. Mm. I might watch it a few times, but I'll watch it in one sitting. I think that was very, very good. We introduced another species that I'm really interested to see more of in the Refusians, which I like. I always like when, particularly in our alien stories, I like if it's an alien I would want to see more of. Where it gets let down, I think, is the character development.
Yeah.
Not enough time and focus was put into the character development. I think they were putting a bit too much time and focus into the concept and the premise and like the special effects and things, when they could have been doing a bit more on the character development. I kind of wanted Dodo maybe to speak up for herself a little bit, or to sort of be like, hey, I'm not your granddaughter, so
like there are times like where like character development doesn't need to happen, like no. for example, like you can go back to the Crusade, like Ian was the action man, Barbara was like boss Barbara, it's like fuck you, you're not going to torture me type thing, and that's what we knew to expect from them. There was no shocking revelations about those two characters. And whereas here now, we've got Stephen traveling with someone that's never traveled with the Doctor before. As like we've got like with Katarina, she died. And that's the unfortunate case. There was no downtime. There was no relaxing time. Whereas with Dodo, we've had that relaxing time. We've had that thing, and he's proved to be an absolute fucking dick. So this is a time like where character development was probably needed.
Yeah, so it kind of lost a little bit of points from me on that one. Mm-hmm. Where it lost the bulk of the points, I'll be honest. So I knocked off maybe like half to 3/4 of a point for the character development. It's not always needed, but I think it would have been nice in this story in particular if we'd had a little bit more. Where it lost the bulk of it for me is a carryover from last week. And it centers around Stephen as a character. Mm-hmm. So I've noticed throughout this season, and yes, I acknowledge the fact that William Hartnell was becoming increasingly more ill, but the show is called Doctor Who, not Stephen Taylor. And both with last week and this week, you see a change of trying to make, at least in my opinion, as if they're trying to make Stephen the main character.
Yeah.
You know, Stephen stays on board to rally the humans together. Stephen speaks at the trial. And I don't watch Doctor Who for Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
I watch Doctor Who for the Doctor. And for me, I wanted to see more from the Doctor to make up for the very little we got of him last week.
Mm.
Do you know, but without that character development time put in, and, you know, I think the story could have done with a nice Hartnell monologue. Do you know, I think it would have been nice. And for me, like, that's a concern that I have going forward, is throughout this season, Hartnell is kind of being pushed to the sidelines.
Mm.
And some of that is necessity. I understand that. But I don't like it as a trend. And, you know, we saw last week that Stephen carrying the show doesn't work.
No.
So hopefully we won't see much more of that. Fingers crossed. So for me, I think it's while there's no outstanding performances in the story and the character development isn't as much as I'd like it to be, it's a solid story with an interesting premise. It's very well shot. The character designs are interesting. The idea of the refusing being invisible is interesting. Would I watch it again? Maybe not. Would I go out of my way to avoid it? No. So for me, I think it was a solid, stable episode with an interesting cliffhanger that I am interested to follow up on next week. So I gave it a 3.
Cool. That's a fair thing. And hopefully now when we come to next week's story, literally the Doctor won't be completely phased out.
Yeah, that's kind of partially where my concern came from. Yeah. Like, they have him invisible. This better not be a trend.
So, as for next week.
Yeah, so next week we're going to be seeing what happens with our invisible Doctor, how to deal with the Doctor that's invisible and intangible, maybe. When we explore the Celestial Toymaker.
Ooh, so yeah, I get to say it now. Ooh.
Ooh. Yeah. So tune in next week and we'll talk to you then.
Bye.
Bye.